Are you hearing that rope hit the flagpole again? Or is it just another morning pretending to mean something? The metal clinks carried through the mist, a rhythm mocking her bandaged arm. Each sound a rumor pressed into muscle. Then the gym lights flickered, catching the faint glow beneath linen, the quiet proof she never named. Even the heartbeat between ticks felt like inspection. Still, when the fans stopped and silence filled the rafters, he didn't laugh. He just watched her move, steady as duty whispering, "Let me take you back." The rain hadn't stopped since dawn, just pressed itself into the air until the whole base smelled like wet canvas and rust. Inside the training gym at Fort Raleigh, fluorescent lights hummed above rows of sailors shifting on worn blue mats. Rubber sweat and disinfectant mixed in a familiar haze. Colonel Myers paced the line, broad frame, silver crew cut, voice gravel rough from coffee and command. His boots made short, decisive clicks that echoed between the steel beams. "PT, excuse, huh?" he muttered, stopping in front of Captain Evelyn Keene. "We don't do sympathy training here, Captain." A few of the recruits snorted. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. The colonel didn't stop them. He liked the sound of control settling into the room. Evelyn stood centered, one arm bandaged from wrist to elbow. The linen gleamed faintly beneath the gym lights. She didn't move, didn't defend herself, only drew a steady breath that lifted her chest and steadied the silence. "Permission to continue the drill, sir," she said. The words landed soft, almost polite, yet the edges cut clean. Myers tilted his head, lips tightening. "You sure you can manage the obstacle course with that arm? I can manage the standard, sir." The recruit's eyes bounced between them. A fan ticked above, pushing the thick air. Somewhere, a drop of rain slipped through the roof seam and struck the mat with a patient plink. Standard, Myers repeated. "That's good. We'll see if your standard matches mine." He turned toward the others. "Form up 10 laps. Show the captain how the uninjured perform." Boots thudded in rhythm. Evelyn waited for the lane to clear before stepping forward. Her stride was calm, unhurried. The bandage on her arm caught the blue-white glare of the training lights, a small glint of teal like light beneath water. Then she started running. Each circuit of the gym pulled the humidity tighter. The smell of rubber thickened. The room became a single breathing organism of motion and doubt. Myers watched, expression unreadable, arms folded. By the third lap, one recruit stumbled. Evelyn stopped beside him, wordlessly adjusted his footing, then kept running. The gesture was so fluid it looked rehearsed, almost ceremonial. Still, he didn't see the scar. He saw only the bandage, the supposed weakness, the excuse. When the laps ended, Myers checked his watch. Not bad for someone taking medical leniency. "No leniency, sir," Evelyn replied. "Just maintenance." The colonel's brow furrowed. "Maintenance of what?" She paused at the mat's edge, breathing steady. "Discipline." The word hung between them, low and weighty, the kind that made younger sailors glance at one another, uncertain whether they just heard defiance or doctrine. Myers's jaw twitched. "Discipline, huh? Let's hope the board agrees with that definition." He moved on clipboard under one arm, issuing new commands down the line. Yet the gym had changed. The laughter had gone. Even the air felt rearranged. Evelyn flexed her fingers inside the wrap once, as if testing a forgotten memory. The faint light shimmered again, reflecting off the bandage like something waiting to be seen. Micro Cliff, he didn't see the scar. By late afternoon, the rain had eased into a steady whisper on the tin awning above the canteen. The scent of coffee and wet pavement drifted through the open doorway. Private Noah Ellis, still in his damp PT uniform, spotted Captain Evelyn Keene alone at the corner table, a mug steaming before her. He hesitated, tray in hand. The memory of that morning, his own nervous laughter, still stung. Finally, he took a breath and stepped closer. Ma'am, he started, voice low. About earlier, I shouldn't have laughed. Evelyn looked up, eyes calm as weathered steel. Then came a small smile, one of those brief, forgiving curves that made a person want to do better. PT just means patience training at our age, she said. Ellis blinked, then laughed despite himself. Guess I'm already failing the course. Not yet, she replied. You showed up? They shared a quiet chuckle. The noise of trays and chatter filled the gaps between words, but around their table the sound seemed to thin. A minute later, she rose to leave, nodding once to him, before disappearing through the rain-washed corridor. The training wing was empty by dusk. Fluorescent lights flickered against pale cinder-block walls. Evelyn stood before the mirror in the locker room, rolling up the sleeve that had stayed hidden all day. The linen came loose with a faint hiss. Underneath lay a thin, even scar, pale as chalk, and straight as a ruler, the partial reveal. She studied it, neither pride nor shame in her face, only a stillness that carried memory without sentiment. For a long time she breathed slowly, the kind of breath that cleans a memory before it hurts. The reflection in the glass was more than a face. It was a record of hours, weight, and weather, a quiet proof of something endured. Then faint static broke through the silence. A radio on the shelf crackled alive, picking up an old tune, something from the 1970s, all brass and longing. Between notes, a voice emerged, aged but unmistakable. Standards don't retire, Captain. It was Chief Harlan, her former instructor, his recorded message playing from the unit's old voicemail memory. Evelyn didn't move. Her gaze stayed on the scar's reflection, the light tracing its edges like a drawn line of discipline. Rain began to patter harder against the roof, slow, deliberate beats marking the silence. She reached out and switched off the radio. The hum faded, leaving the sound of water and her breathing. A silent beat stretched through the room. Then, almost to herself, she murmured, "A standard's not what you keep. It's what keeps you." The words settled into the empty space as if the building itself had been waiting to hear them again. Outside, a gust of wind pushed the rain sideways, rattling the loose gutter above the entrance. Somewhere across the base, the evening watch horn sounded a small, comforting proof that the day's rhythm hadn't broken, only shifted. Evelyn rewrapped her arm slower this time, tying the band tight, but not to hide, just to mark readiness. The scar disappeared, but the steadiness in her eyes did not. Morning came cleaner than the day before sunlight, cutting through low fog rainwater, drying on the concrete paths of Fort Raleigh. The air smelled of wet pine and machine oil. Out behind the officers' quarters, a porch swing creaked slowly, marking time. Captain Evelyn Keene sat there, boots unlaced, steam rising from a mug of coffee on the railing. The base was waking up, cadence calls in the distance, gulls tracing slow circles above the roofs. She had a letter in her hand, unopened, but already familiar in weight. Footsteps approached the porch steps, quick, uncertain. "Morning, ma'am." Private Noah Ellis held a small stack of mail. "Post office run. Thought you'd want this one first." Evelyn nodded, gesturing to the empty seat. "Appreciate it. Sit a minute." He hesitated, then sat careful, like he might tip the balance of the swing. They watched the training yard in silence until Ellis said, "They were joking again." "At the post office line? About the PT excuse?" Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "They'll find new material soon enough." He shook his head. "I don't get why they keep at it. They saw you run those laps yesterday. Guess strength looks different when it doesn't shout." She glanced at him, measured, steady. "That's the problem, Private. People confuse noise with proof." He frowned. "You mean Strength isn't volume, she said. It's consistency. The kind that doesn't ask to be noticed. A truck engine idled somewhere beyond the tree. A breeze carried the sharp scent of diesel and roasted coffee, the unofficial perfume of every base morning. Evelyn turned the envelope over. The seal bore the emblem of her former command. Her thumb lingered on the stamp, NASA Unit 12. She opened it with one clean motion. Inside a single line written in firm block letters, "Discipline is the quiet proof." She read it under her breath, once for herself, once for the air. Ellis leaned slightly closer. "From Chief Harlan?" Evelyn nodded. "He trained half the people who taught me everything else. He believed the real test of a soldier wasn't in orders followed, but in the silence between them." Ellis absorbed that, eyes on the letter. "Guess that's not in the manual." "No," she said, smiling. "But neither is respect." A pause stretched. Then he asked, "You think they'll ever stop doubting you, ma'am?" She sipped her coffee, gaze on the horizon. "Doubt isn't the enemy, Private. It's the test. Same one you'll face when it's your turn on that mat." He nodded slowly. "So, tomorrow?" Her smile deepened, faint lines at the corners of her eyes, catching the light. "Tomorrow they'll see what discipline looks like." The sentence landed like a soft promise, not a threat, something crafted of certainty and weather. From down the road came the faint laughter of recruits lining up at the post office, again their jokes carried on the morning wind. Evelyn folded the letter, tucking it inside her jacket. The prop partial became the proof ink, replacing scar. The porch swing creaked once more. Coffee steam drifted into the cool air. Minnie Cliff tomorrow. They'll see what discipline looks like. Noon heat pressed against the gym windows, flattening the light into white stripes across the blue mats. The fans were off the air, still as a held breath. Every unit on base had been ordered to assemble. Colonel Myers stood in front of them, sleeves rolled, clipboard tucked under one arm. His tone carried that dry edge of challenge, the kind he saved for the moments he wanted remembered. "Captain Keene," he called. "You claim discipline doesn't depend on strength. Let's see what that looks like in motion." A murmur rolled through the ranks. The young sailors glanced at one another, unsure whether they were about to witness a test or a punishment. Evelyn stepped forward from the second row, the sound of her boots sharp but calm. She gave a single nod. "Understood, sir." Myers gestured toward the mat. "Demonstrate a real engagement. Standard procedures. No sympathy this time." She removed her outer jacket and set it neatly on the bench. The movement was deliberate, almost ritual. When the sleeve fell away, the scar on her arm caught the light, thin and pale like metal, scored by time. The bandage was gone. A ripple of silence spread through the room. Even the ventilation fans seemed to pause. Myers froze mid-step. His gaze locked on the mark, then narrowed, not in anger, but recognition. Slowly, he exhaled. "That's..." He began, voice dropping an octave. The Phoenix Division insignia burn. The recruits didn't understand, but the older chiefs did. The symbol wasn't a wound. It was a credential. The Phoenix burn was a mark given to those who had completed live operations in Kandahar, a mission line never spoken about openly. Under the inspection lights, the scar seemed to glow faintly, a fire without flame conviction under scrutiny. Evelyn stood steady, saying nothing. Myers' clipboard slipped slightly in his grasp. His jaw tightened. The man who had once mocked her for an excuse now saw what that mark represented, duty engraved in skin, not vanity. He straightened his back. The sound of boots shifted behind him as the younger soldiers sensed a change in temperature they couldn't name. Then, without a word, Colonel Myers snapped to attention. The gesture struck the room like thunder wrapped in silence. No command, no announcement, just a crisp, precise salute that froze every breath. It wasn't a salute to rank. It was a moral salute, a recognition of discipline older than orders. Evelyn's expression didn't change. She returned the salute slowly, almost tenderly, her gaze level and calm. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The clock on the far wall ticked each second, loud as a gavel. The smell of dust and oil floated in the heat. Private Ellis stood near the back chest, tight, realizing this was what she had meant by proof. In that silence, the line between authority and respect blurred, rearranged itself, and settled into something cleaner. The colonel lowered his hand. Dismissed, he said quietly, not to her, but to the whole room. His voice had lost the gravel of command. It sounded almost human. As the sailors filed out, Ellis lingered, catching Evelyn's glance. She gave the smallest nod. The scar on her arm caught the last shard of light before she rolled the sleeve down again. The room exhaled. Justice didn't shout. It stood still. The diner just outside Fort Raleigh hummed with the usual Friday rhythm, silver coffee pots, hissing vinyl booths, sighing under the weight of long stories and tired backs. The neon sign out front flickered between red and white like a heartbeat in the drizzle. Evelyn sat in her regular corner seat jacket folded beside her hands, wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. The place smelled of bacon grease and fresh pie. A radio behind the counter played softly, the kind of music that fills silences without demanding attention. The doorbell chimed. Colonel Myers stepped in. No clipboard, no sharp bark of authority. Just a quiet man carrying a stack of papers under one arm, and the look of someone who'd recently laid down a heavy load. He spotted her and walked over his boots slower than usual. "Mind if I sit?" Captain Evelyn looked up, calm as ever. "It's your base, sir." He took the seat anyway, setting the folded forms between them. The waitress poured him coffee without asking. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Myers cleared his throat. "We're updating the training manual," he said, tapping the top sheet. "The Keen Standard, they're calling it." The words seemed to hang in the air, half official, half apology. Evelyn blinked once, then let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "That sounds unnecessary." "It's overdue," he replied. And accurate. At the counter, a few older veterans turned from their seats, men with weathered faces and caps embroidered with faded unit patches. They nodded subtly, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement. The kind of nod soldiers give when something long unsettled finally sits right again. Community echo rippled through the room. Someone turned up the radio. From the church down the street, the faint sound of a choir drifted in. "God Bless America" carried on the cool evening wind. Outside the window, the flag on the diner's pole was being folded by 2 junior sailors. Each fold, careful, precise, unhurried, a small act of justice, finding its rhythm again. Private Noah Ellis appeared in the doorway, reins still clinging to his shoulders. He hesitated, then joined their table, sliding into the booth beside the colonel. He glanced at the papers, then at Evelyn. "So, PT finally stands for proper thanks." Evelyn smirked. Myers tried not to, but failed. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, just steady and warm, the kind of sound that erases the edges of a long day. The waitress, catching the moment, placed 3 fresh cups of coffee on the table. The steam rose between them, twisting like a quiet handshake. Myers raised his cup slightly. "To standards," he said. Evelyn lifted hers. "To keeping them quiet." Ellis, the youngest at the table, looked between them. "To learning what they mean." The 3 cups met in the middle, a soft chime. Not a toast, but a testimony. The clock above the counter ticked toward closing. Outside, the flag's final fold disappeared into the sailors' hands. The song from the choir faded into stillness, leaving only the murmur of the coffee pot and the low hum of belonging. Justice Evelyn thought rarely arrived with noise. It simply showed up, ordered coffee, and sat down beside you. The week passed quietly, the bass returning to its rhythm of drills, mail calls, and evening bugles. But that Sunday, as the sun lowered behind the hangars, the entire courtyard of Fort Raleigh turned gold. A new bronze plaque had been mounted beside the memorial wall, simple, understated, perfectly aligned with the older engravings. Its surface caught the late light like a held breath. The inscription read, "Discipline doesn't need an audience. No rank, no title, just the lesson itself." A few veterans stood nearby, their uniforms softened by the years. The air carried a faint scent of cut grass and warm metal. Colonel Myers was among them, shoulders squared yet gentler somehow, his posture a quiet echo of the salute he'd given days before. Private Noah Ellis stood beside him, holding a folded program from the dedication ceremony. The younger recruits milled about the edges of the crowd, speaking in low tones. No one said the word incident. They called it the standard. When Evelyn Keene appeared, the chatter ebbed. She wore no ribbons, no bars, just a plain field jacket and that same stillness that had silenced a gym full of voices. The flag above the courtyard moved slightly in the wind, its shadow brushing across her shoulder. Myers stepped forward first. "Captain," he said simply. Evelyn nodded once. "Colonel." No formal salute this time, just two soldiers standing level, both understanding that ceremony was redundant where respect had already been earned. Ellis broke the silence. "They finished the plaque this morning," he said. "They wanted the quote to come from you." Evelyn traced her fingers along the engraved letters, the bronze cool against her skin. The faint reflection of the flag shimmered on the old scar, turning it silver for a heartbeat. "I didn't write it," she murmured. "I just learned it late." Wind shifted through the trees. The smell of jet fuel from the nearby airfield mixed with something sweeter, the lingering smoke of a cookout drifting from the enlisted barracks. The sound of a guitar carried faintly slow chords rising into the fading light. Ellis watched her, then spoke quietly, almost to himself. "She taught us that attention is respect, not rank." The word hung there, attention, not as command, but understanding. A closing loop to the moment when a salute had changed everything. Myers gave a small nod, the kind that seals a truth instead of ending it. "That's how it should stay," he said. Evelyn smiled just barely. "Then, it's yours to keep." The flag rippled again, its red and white stripes blurring into the amber of the sky. For a long moment, no one moved. The bugler at the far end of the courtyard began to play taps, soft, unhurried notes that folded into the evening. Evelyn lowered her hand from the plaque, the last light sliding across her arm. Around her, the small group of sailors stood in still silence, each in their own version of attention. The wind lifted the corners of the programs, scattering them like quiet promises. If this story moved you, share it forward. The courtyard was quiet, except for the rustle of the flag and the low hum of a guitar somewhere beyond the chapel. Colonel Myers and Ellis stood with their hands at their sides, while the bronze plaque caught the last sun, its simple line reading, "Discipline doesn't need an audience." Still, the words felt larger than the metal. They carried every lesson the base had learned about respect that doesn't announce itself. Evelyn touched the scar on her arm, a symbolic proof, not a wound, while the light moved across it like a slow salute. Then the bugler's note drifted out over the field, thin and steady, reminding them all that attention is respect, not rank. And for a moment the base seemed to breathe as one quietly certain that justice can stand without applause. If this story moved you, share it forward.